Captain Lee Haon pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation deck. His breath fogged the window as he watched something that would haunt humanity forever. Far below, Earth was dying. The Zephyrian ships looked like giant diamonds. Falling from the sky, their crystal holes caught the sunlight and threw it back in sharp cutting beams. Each ship was perfectly shaped, with angles so precise they hurt to look at. These aliens loved order and perfection above all else. But the Kolek ships were different. They moved like living things through the clouds. Their hulls breathed and pulsed with strange lights. Tubes and wires grew from their surfaces like veins. These creatures had turned themselves into living machines long ago. "Captain, they still won't answer our calls," said Lieutenant Park Jin. Her hand shook as she worked at her station. She had been trying to reach both alien fleets for hours. He closed his eyes for a moment. 3 months ago, everything had seemed possible. Earth's leaders had been so proud when both alien empires agreed to meet here. Finally, humans would help end a war that had burned across the galaxy for 500 years. The Zephyrians had seemed interested in peace. Their crystal ambassadors spoke in mathematical formulas that somehow made perfect sense. They valued logic and efficiency. War was messy and wasteful. The Koleks had also listened. Their biomechanical diplomats could reshape their faces to copy human expressions. They spoke of evolution and growth beyond the limits of flesh. Both sides wanted to move past this ancient conflict. Then Earth's president made the offer that changed everything. "We can provide neutral ground for your peace talks," she had said, "but we cannot provide soldiers for either side. Humanity will not choose between you." That was when the alien fleets had gone silent. Now those same fleets hung over Earth like storm clouds. Haon could see their weapons charging through his telescope. The air itself seemed to vibrate with deadly energy. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship," called Communications Officer Kim Soo from across the room. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was cold and mechanical. "Human station, you are ordered to evacuate. Immediately. This world will be cleansed of contamination before we resume our conflict." "Contamination?" Hyun grabs the microphone. "This is our home. We offered you peace. You offered nothing of value. Your refusal to choose sides proves your species lacks proper judgment. Such flaws cannot be allowed to spread." Transmission cut off. A moment later, the Kolek sent their own message. The voice bubbled and hissed like something speaking through liquid. "Weak flesh beings, you have failed the test of evolution. Your world will be recycled into something more useful. Do not resist the change." Hyun felt his stomach drop. "They're not here to make peace anymore. They're here to kill us all." The first attack came without warning. A beam of pure energy lanced down from a Zephyrian ship and struck the Pacific Ocean. Where it hit, the water turned to steam in seconds. The beam moved inland, turning everything it touched into smooth glass. Kim Soo screamed as she watched the beam sweep across her home. City of Busan. 2 million people live there. In 3 seconds, they were all gone. The beam left behind only a patch of green glass where the city used to be. The Koleks attacked next. Their ships released clouds of something that looked like glowing dust. Where the dust settled, terrible changes began. Trees stretched and twisted into shapes like bones. Animals merged with machines in ways that should have been impossible. The very ground began to pulse like a heartbeat. "Why are they doing this?" Kim Soo whispered. Tears ran down her face as she watched her world burn. "Because to them we don't matter," Hyun said. His voice was flat and dead. "We're just something in their way. They want to clean us up before they go back to fighting each other." All around the orbital station, evacuation ships launched into space. Each one carried a few hundred survivors. Some headed for the moon bases. Others aimed for the colonies on Mars. Most just flew out into the darkness between stars, hoping to find somewhere safe. Hyun watched Earth die below him. The blue and green world where humans had lived for thousands of years was turning black and gray. The Zephyrians turned forests into glass sculptures. The Koleks transformed cities into writhing masses of living metal. In 6 hours, it was over. Earth still spun in space, but nothing lived on its surface anymore. The oceans had boiled away, the continents were covered in glass and twisted metal, and even the air was gone, burned away by alien weapons. The two alien fleets hung in space for a few minutes, as if admiring their work. Then they flew away to continue their war somewhere else. They had forgotten about Earth already, but in the scattered ships fleeing into space, humanity remembered everything. Captain Lee Hyun stood among the survivors and made a promise that would echo through the next 100 years. "This will not be forgotten," he whispered into the darkness. "Someday, somehow, we will make them pay." The refugees carried more than just their lives into exile. They carried a memory of blue skies. In green forests, they carried the image of their burning world. Most importantly, they carried a hunger for justice that would grow stronger with each passing year. Earth was dead, but humanity had learned something valuable from its death. They had learned what their enemies were capable of. They had learned that in this galaxy, only the strong survived, and they had learned to hate. Commander Choi Min crawled through the narrow tunnel, her knees scraping against the metal floor. The air was stale and tasted like rust. Behind her, 36 other humans followed in single file. This was their home now, the forgotten spaces inside. An old mining station that nobody wanted anymore. 50 years had passed since Earth burned. Min had been just a child then, carried away in her mother's arms as their world died. Now she was the leader of this small group of survivors, and her hair was already turning gray from the stress of keeping them all alive. "Supply ship in 6 hours," whispered Kangdae, her second in command. His voice was so quiet it barely carried through the tunnel. "We do this like always. Stay hidden, take only what they won't miss. Leave no signs we were ever here." Min nodded, and checked her holographic map. Tiny dots of light showed where other human groups were hiding across the galaxy. Some lived inside hollow asteroids. Others had built shelters on dead moons where no aliens ever went. A few had even made homes in the wreckage of planets destroyed in the Great War. Each group was small. The largest had maybe 200 people. The smallest had only a dozen. But they were all connected by secret messages sent through space. They shared supplies, information, and most importantly, hope. The aliens thought humans were all dead. It was exactly what the survivors wanted them to think. Min remembered the early years after the burning. Those had been the hardest times. Humans had tried to find new worlds to settle, but everywhere they went, one of the alien empires would find them. The Zephyrians would arrive with their crystal ships and declare the humans unworthy of prime real estate. The Koleks would show up and decide the humans were genetically inferior specimens. So humanity learned to disappear. The Zephyrians loved order and clean lines. They built perfect cities with straight roads and matching buildings. Humans learned to hide in the messy places they ignored, the old industrial zones. The waste processing areas, the maintenance tunnels like this one, the Koleks were obsessed with biological perfection. They threw away anything that didn't meet their standards. Humans learned to live off their garbage, to thrive in the places they considered worthless. "Commander," said a young voice behind her. Min turned to see Park Hannah crawling up with a datapad in her hands. Hannah had been born in exile 23 years ago. She had never seen a blue sky or felt rain on her face, but she worked harder than anyone to keep the human settlements connected. "Message from the Vega Group," Hannah whispered. "They figured out how another piece of Kalex biotech works. They're sending the plans to everyone." "What about our people near Zephyrian space?" "They mapped 3 more crystal factories. The information is already spreading to all the other cells." Min felt a fierce pride in her chest. The aliens had made one huge mistake. They thought humans would just give up and die like any other weak species. Instead, scattered across the galaxy, humans were learning everything they could about their enemies. Every settlement had a job. The groups near Zephyrian territory studied crystal technology and mapped their cities. The humans close to Kolek space learned about bioengineering and genetic manipulation. Others focused on alien languages, military tactics, or communication systems. They shared everything through coded messages that looked like space junk to alien scanners. Slowly, piece by piece, humanity was building a complete picture of both empires. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their technologies, their cultures, everything. The children born in exile grew up knowing this was their mission. They learned alien languages before they could properly speak human ones. They studied enemy technology like other kids might study games. They knew they were preparing for something big, even if they didn't know exactly what. "How many settlements do we have now?" Min asked as they reached a wider part of the tunnel. 217 that we know about, Hannah replied. "Probably twice that many who stay completely hidden." Min crawled to a small porthole and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Zephyrians and Calyx were still fighting their ancient war. They had been battling each other for 500 years before they ever found Earth. They would probably keep fighting for 500 more, but they had no idea that patient human eyes were watching them from the darkness, learning from them. Preparing, Min thought about her mother who had died 10 years ago in a different tunnel on a different station. Her mother had made her promise to remember Earth, the blue oceans, the green forests, the warm sunshine. But Min had learned to love something else. The cold, patient darkness between the stars where humans had learned to survive. The aliens thought they had one. When they burned Earth, they thought they had solved their human problem. Instead, they had created something much more dangerous. A species with nothing left to lose and all the time in the galaxy to plan their revenge. "Let them think we're all dead," Min whispered to herself as she watched the stars. "Let them forget we ever existed. When the time comes, we'll remind them." In the tunnels around her, 36 other humans prepared for another day of invisible survival. Each one carried the memory of a burning world and the promise that someday, somehow, the balance would be restored. Agent Song-woo walked through the doors of the Calyx breeding facility, his heart beating fast inside his chest. But the guards couldn't hear it. The biomechanical sensors built into his ribs made fake heartbeat sounds that matched what they expected from a low-level worker. His reflection in the polished walls looked alien now. 3 years of surgery had changed almost everything about his body. Metal wires ran under his skin like veins. His bones had been injected with synthetic materials that showed up on Calyx scanners as slave worker modifications. Even his blood had been altered to carry the genetic markers of their lowest caste. Song had volunteered for this mission, knowing he might never be human again. The changes to his body were permanent. But someone had to get inside Calyx society, and he was one of the few humans who could learn their strange biolanguage. Worker designation 7742. Report to Genetics Lab 7, clicked the overseer. The sound came from a creature that was half machine, half flesh. Its voice box had been replaced with something that made clicking and bubbling sounds instead of normal speech. Song clicked back in perfect Calyx biolanguage. "Acknowledge prime form. This unit reports for duty." He had spent 2 years learning to speak like that. Calyx didn't use words the way humans did. They communicated through biological sounds, clicking bones, bubbling fluids, electrical pulses through their metal parts. Making those sounds had required surgery on his throat and tongue. As he walked to the lab, Song memorized everything he saw: the layout of the corridors, the security checkpoints, the locations of computer terminals. Most importantly, he watched the Calyx themselves, learning their habits and routines. In Genetics Lab 7, Song worked alongside other slave workers. Most were aliens from conquered worlds, modified to serve their new masters. None of them looked quite human anymore. The Calyx believed in improving their workers by adding machine parts or changing their biology. Song pretended to be just another slave. But his enhanced memory was recording everything. He memorized genetic sequences, chemical formulas, and the layout of the facility's data cores. After months of careful observation, he identified the most important target, Primeform Zactyl, one of the Calyx High Command. Meanwhile, 3 star systems away, Agent Yunbo moved through a very different kind of alien city. The Zephyrian Crystal City was all sharp angles and perfect geometry. Every building was made of living crystal that grew in mathematical patterns. The walls, hummed with harmonic frequencies that made her modified bones vibrate. Bo had undergone different surgeries to fit in here. Her arms and legs had been stretched longer to match Zephyrian proportions. Crystal implants ran along her spine, making her look like a low-level servitor. Her human eyes had been replaced with multifaceted sensors that could see the light patterns Zephyrians used for communication. The changes hurt constantly. Crystal implants weren't meant for human bodies, but the pain helped her stay focused on her mission. Servitor Unit, attend geometric optimization in Sector 12, harmonized the Crystal Overseer. Its voice was like music, but cold and mathematical. Bo harmonized, back in the precise tones she had learned. Getting the frequency wrong could expose her as a spy. She had spent years training her vocal cords to produce the exact mathematical ratios that Zephyrians considered proper speech. As she worked in the crystal growth chambers, Bo studied everything around her. The Zephyrians were obsessed with perfection and order. Every surface was polished smooth. Every angle was precisely calculated. They viewed their crystal cities as works of art that happened to be functional, but Bo was learning their weaknesses. 2. The Zephyrians were so focused on perfection that they ignored anything they considered flawed or inferior. 8. That's why they barely noticed servitors like her. In their minds, imperfect beings weren't worth attention. Both agents sent their information back to hidden human settlements through carefully coded transmissions. The data looked like normal maintenance reports to alien scanners, but human codebreakers could extract the real intelligence. Dr. Nam. Key received these reports at a secret research station built inside a hollow asteroid. She had been analyzing alien technology for 30 years, ever since the burning. Her hair was white now, but her mind was sharper than ever. The pattern is becoming clear, she told her team as they studied the latest intelligence. Both empires are exhausted from their war. They've been fighting for 500 years and it's bleeding them dry. The reports from Song and Bo confirmed what other agents had discovered. The Koleks were running out of genetic material for their experiments. The population was declining because they had modified themselves so much that many couldn't reproduce anymore. The Zephyrians were having different problems. Their perfect crystal cities required enormous amounts of energy to maintain. The war had disrupted their supply lines, and some of their greatest structures were beginning to crack and fade. Neither side can win, Namki realized. But neither side can afford to lose either. They're trapped in their own war. This information spread to human settlements across the galaxy. Leaders like Commander Choi Min studied the reports and began to see new possibilities. Maybe humanity didn't need to defeat both empires in direct combat. Maybe there was a smarter way. Song Woo continued his dangerous work inside the Calyx facility, his human heart beating with artificial rhythms. Yunbo walked through crystal corridors, her modified eyes seeing frequencies no human was meant to perceive. Both agents knew they were gathering the intelligence that would determine humanity's future. The aliens had made humans into refugees and exiles, but in doing so, they had also made them into the perfect spies. Agent Song Woo stood in the sterile white laboratory, his artificial heart pumping synthetic blood through veins that were no longer entirely human. 8 years of living as a Calyx. Slave had changed him in ways that went deeper than just his modified body. He thought in their bio-language now, dreamed in their clicking sounds, and sometimes forgot what his real name used to be. But today, he remembered exactly who he was and why he was here. Prime form Zactyl loomed over him, a towering creature. A flesh and metal that had once been purely biological. Now tubes and wires grew from its skin like parasitic plants. Its eyes were mechanical sensors that could see into multiple spectrums of light. Worker designation 7742. It clicked in biospeak. Reconnaissance data requires verification. Song transmitted the false intelligence through his neural implants. Data that had taken human scientists months to create. The information looked completely real. Energy readings from actual Zephyrian weapons, mixed with theoretical designs that suggested something terrifying. The crystal forms have developed new weapon technology, Song clicked back. Our probe recorded these signatures before destruction by enemy patrol. The data painted a picture of Zephyrian scientists growing weapons inside their crystal cities. Weapons that could shatter biomechanical tissue at the molecular level. Weapons that could end the Kalex forever. It was all lies, but perfect lies. The energy signatures were real, stolen from Zephyrian power sources. The weapon designs were based on actual crystal technology. Only the combination was false, but that combination suggested the Zephyrians had finally found a way to win their ancient war. Zakdal's mechanical eyes flickered as it processed the data. This cannot be permitted. It bubbled through its modified voice box. Alert all prime forms. The crystal spawn must be eliminated before this technology spreads. 3 star systems away, Agent Yunbo faced her own moment of truth. The Zephyrian High Council chamber was a perfect geometric space carved from a single massive crystal. Light patterns danced across the walls in mathematical sequences that hurt to look at with human eyes, even modified ones. Bo's elongated body ached constantly. From the crystal implants along her spine, the modifications had never quite healed properly, but she ignored the pain and harmonized her report in the precise frequencies that Zephyrians considered proper communication. Surveillance data confirms biomechanical integration achievement. She sang in their mathematical language. Kalax forces have successfully merged crystal growth technology with organic matrices. The lie was as carefully crafted as Song's deception. Evidence showed Kolex bioforms growing crystal structures inside their bodies, a violation of everything Zephyrians held sacred. Their crystal technology was pure, mathematical, perfect. The idea of it being contaminated by organic flesh was worse than any military threat. The High Council's harmonic voices rose in discord, the Zephorian equivalent of outrage. Abomination, they sang together, sacred patterns corrupted by inferior biology. This contamination must be cleansed completely. But Song and Bo were just 2 pieces of a much larger plan. Across 17 star systems, human agents were moving simultaneously. Communication specialists intercepted messages between the 2 empires and altered them subtly. Kolek's peace proposal became an ultimatum demanding surrender. A Zephyrian offer to negotiate became a threat to destroy all biomechanical life. Supply convoy routes were leaked to enemy forces. Trade negotiations were sabotaged. Every attempt at diplomacy was twisted into an act of aggression. Slowly, carefully, humanity was pouring fuel on the fire of an ancient war. The breakthrough came during a secret peace summit on a neutral moon. Both empires had sent their most moderate leaders, beings who actually wanted to end the 500-year conflict. Ambassador Zephkal represented the Zephyrians, a crystal form known for its logical approach to problem-solving. Biolord Halvek spoke for the Kalex, one of the few who still remembered what it was like before the biomechanical modifications. Human agents had been planning this moment for months. The assassinations had to happen simultaneously and leave evidence that would implicate both sides. Zephkal died when someone introduced a harmonic frequency that shattered its crystal matrix. Halvex was killed by a bioweapon that dissolved its organic components while leaving the mechanical parts intact. The evidence pointed to enemy action in both cases. The Zephyrians found biomechanical residue near their ambassador's body. The Kalex discovered crystal fragments in their leader's remains within hours. Both empires were convinced the other side had murdered their peace negotiators. Deep inside a rogue planet drifting between star systems, Commander Choi Min watched. The reports flow into her command center. The Void Station was humanity's greatest achievement. A massive settlement built inside a world that had been thrown out of its solar system millions of years ago. No alien scanner could detect the life hidden in its core. Min's hair was white now, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that had sustained her through 50 years of exile. Around her, hundreds of human operators coordinated the final phase of their plan. Children who had been born in the darkness between stars now worked as adults to orchestrate the destruction of 2 empires. Phase 4 is complete, reported Intelligence Chief Lee's son. Both sides are mobilizing for total war. The Kalex are deploying their entire biofleet, 1,500 vessels, including their planet-killer organisms. Zephyrian response? Min asked. 1,200 crystal ships confirmed. They're activating their harmonic resonance weapons, the ones that can shatter matter at the atomic level. Min nodded slowly. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The two empires that had casually burned Earth 50 years ago were about to destroy themselves. All it had taken was patience, careful planning, and the willingness to become the monsters their enemies had created. "Signal all agents," she commanded. "Withdraw to safe positions. Let them finish what we started." Admiral Park Hana stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, staring out at the graveyard of two civilizations. The ship hummed quietly around her, its hybrid engines combining the best of both alien technologies. Crystal power cores pulsed with biomechanical regulators, creating energy systems that neither empire had ever imagined possible. Hannah had been born in exile 43 years ago, delivered in the maintenance tunnels of an abandoned station. While her parents hid from alien patrols, she had never seen Earth's blue skies. But she carried the memory of them in her heart, passed down through stories, told in whispered voices during the dark years. Now she commanded humanity's first real warship, built from the wreckage of their enemies. "Scanning complete, Admiral," reported Tactical Officer Kim Jun from his station. His voice was steady, but Hannah could see the wonder in his eyes as he read the displays. "The Colex biofleets are completely destroyed. Our sensors show less than 12% of their total population survived. What about the Zephyrians? Their crystal cities are in ruins. The harmonic weapons they used in the final battle created some kind of resonance effect that shattered their own structures. We estimate only 8% of their population is still alive." Hannah nodded slowly. The final war between the two empires had lasted 3 years and burned across 47 star systems. Both sides had used weapons so terrible that they destroyed themselves in the process of trying to destroy each other. The Colex had unleashed genetic plagues that turned their own biomechanical forms against them. Entire fleets had dissolved into organic soup when the viruses mutated beyond their creators' control. The Zephyrians had fired harmonic weapons that shattered crystal at the molecular level, not realizing the resonance would spread back to their home cities through their quantum-linked networks. It was exactly what humanity had hoped for when they started this plan 50 years ago. "Signal the fleet," Hannah commanded. "Begin salvage operations. I want recovery teams on every piece of alien technology we can find." Across the former war zone, human ships emerged from their hiding places. For a century, humanity had lived like scavengers, picking through the scraps left behind by greater civilizations. Now those same scavengers had inherited the galaxy. The Vengeance was just the first of humanity's new fleet, built in secret shipyards hidden inside hollow asteroids. Each vessel combined stolen alien technologies in ways their original creators had never imagined. Crystal hulls grown around biomechanical frameworks, harmonic weapons powered by genetic processors, ships that were living art and deadly science at the same time. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the lunar facility," reported communications. Officer Lee Myra. "Dr. Nam Ki wants to address any surviving aliens who might be monitoring our channels." Hannah smiled grimly. Nam Ki was ancient now, well over 90 years old, but her mind was still sharp as a blade. She had spent her entire adult life studying alien technology, preparing for this moment. "Put her through on all frequencies," Hannah ordered. The elderly scientist's voice filled the bridge, speaking simultaneously in human languages. Colex biospeak and Zephyrian harmonic frequencies. The translation systems had taken decades to perfect, but now humanity could speak to any surviving aliens in their own tongues. "This message is for any Zephyrians or Kalax who can still hear these words," Namki began. "We are humanity. 100 years ago, you burned our world because we refused to choose sides in your war. You called us contamination. You said we were too primitive to matter." Hannah looked out at the debris fields drifting past the ship's viewports. Broken crystal formations tumbled through space alongside the corpses of biomechanical vessels. Some of the wreckage was still moving, powered by dying energy sources or mutated organic components that wouldn't stop growing. "You were wrong about us," Namki continued. "We survived in the places you didn't bother to look. We learned from the technologies you threw away. We watched you fight your endless war and waited for the right moment to act." The message was being broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, reaching the scattered survivors of both empires. Most were probably too shocked or injured to understand what they were hearing, but some would listen. Some would realize what had really happened to their civilizations. When you destroyed Earth, you thought you were solving a small problem. The old scientist said, instead, you created something much more dangerous. You taught us that in this galaxy, only the patient survive. You showed us that the greatest victory comes not from strength, but from turning your enemies against each other. Young Kim Jun looked up from his tactical display. Admiral, we're detecting movement in the outer system. Looks like a small group of Kolex survivors trying to escape. Let them go, Hannah said quietly. They're not our enemies anymore. They're just refugees, like we used to be. Namki's voice continued across the communication channels. We offer you the same mercy you showed Earth, the chance to find new homes among the stars. The difference is that we learned from our exile. We hope you can learn from yours. As the human fleet spread out across the ruins of two empires, Hannah thought about the children who would grow up in this new galaxy. They would walk on worlds that had once belonged to their enemies. They would study in schools built from alien crystal and biotechnology. They would never know the fear of hiding in maintenance tunnels or living on scraps. But they would remember the stories. They would know what had happened to the blue world called Earth, and they would understand that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from forgetting the past, but from being patient enough to make it right. The war that burned Earth had finally ended, not with humanity's destruction, but with their inheritance of everything their enemies had built.